Madrid had enough of them, so they're going to hunt, trap and sterilise them. Sounds a bit grievous. Our reporter in Madrid is Guy Hedgecoe. Guy, how bad and for whom is the parakeet problem?
Well, there are a lot of parakeets here. Just 3 years ago there were 10,000 counted in Madrid, and now there are 13,000. So as you can tell, the numbers are growing very fast. And pretty much anywhere in Madrid, in any part of Madrid, you'll find parakeets, even right in the city centre, even those touristy areas right in the middle of Madrid. Now these parakeets originally from Argentina and Uruguay. They became popular as pets back in the 1980s and 90s, and people started importing them to Spain by the thousand. And Blas Molina from the wildlife organisation SEO BirdLife explained to me more about how they ended up on the streets of Madrid after becoming popular pets.
Como emite un sonido que en muchos casos es desagradable.
Because they make a noise which many people who bought these birds as pets found unpleasant, a lot of them were released into the city, and also some birds have escaped. And because they've managed to adapt to these urban areas and they've found the right food and conditions, their numbers have increased enormously.
Now that noise that Blas Molina mentioned is very hard to ignore, and that is a real problem with the monk parakeet. That seems to really irritate people here in Madrid. I think we have a clip of a monk parakeet in action to give you an idea.
Quite like that in the studio, but that's just one. I imagine multiplied by thousands, that's pretty awful. But what's interesting is kind of the effect that they've had. Are they sort of like moving a problem on? Are they replacing, I don't know, what do you call them, native birds? I mean, what happens?
Well, there are other issues as well, apart from the noise. I mean, environmentalists say that the monk parakeet undermines biodiversity by stripping trees in order to make their nests. So, you know, wherever they are, trees are stripped of bark and twigs, and that causes problems in terms of biodiversity. But those nests, by the way, can be enormous, and although nobody's yet been hurt, Madrid City Hall has warned of the danger of the nests falling on people's heads, so that's another problem. But there's also the fact that the monk parakeet is very aggressive towards other species, and that can mean that other weaker birds, for example, are pushed away. And they do seem to be a growing problem for the people of Madrid. There were nearly 200 complaints about parakeets between January and August of this year, and that's almost as many complaints as the whole of last year. So it does seem to be a growing problem for the people of Madrid.
Wow, thank you very much indeed. Guy Hedgecoe in Madrid telling us more about now that is a monk parakeet. In London we've been invaded by, and they're very popular, lots of people love them, rose-ringed parakeets. Many amusing conspiracy theories and urban myths about where they come from. No, they were not first released by Jimi Hendrix.
Here on the BBC World Service, we explore a shared dilemma.
Does humankind have a God-given dominion over the natural world?
That is the story that for the last 2,500 years has shaped Western thinking.
Is there a moral duty for us to prevent animal suffering?
In one life you are a human being, but in the next life you may be the dog or the cow.
Are we here to cultivate and steward the earth?
Our climate problem is actually on our plates. It's in the food industry.
As we witness the destructive impact of people on the environment, 4 writers explore our attitude to other creatures. Continuing with author Panache Chigomadzi.
Is our greatest obstacle to understanding another animal their inability to communicate as we do? Episode 2, The Animals and the Linguists.
Dominion at bbcworldservice.com.
This is Newsday from the BBC with Lawrence Pollard and Carney Shum coming up.
On the way, $14 billion. That's what a conference in France wants to raise in the fight against the killer diseases that are combined TB, HIV and malaria. We talked to a campaigner who lost 3 of her babies to that peril.
Yes, also the aftermath of the BBC Sex for Grades investigation. That's coming up. 2 lecturers in Ghana and Nigeria have now been suspended.
BBC News with Neil Nunes. The White House says it won't cooperate with the impeachment process against President Trump. A White House lawyer said it was unconstitutional and partisan. The Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded by saying President Trump was not above the law. A spokesman for President Erdogan has said the Turkish military and the Free Syrian Army will cross the Syrian border shortly. Fahrettin Altun said Kurdish militants there could either defect or Ankara would have to stop them, as he put it, disrupting Turkey's struggle against Islamic State militants. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has condemned the violence during recent protests in Iraq and called on the government in Baghdad to exercise maximum restraint. Anti-government demonstrations, which began at the start of the month, have seen more than 100 people killed. The Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has warned it'll be very difficult to secure a Brexit deal at the end of the month, when the UK is due to leave the EU. He suggested the language around the discussions had turned toxic in some quarters. The champion Australian trainer Darren Ware has been charged with animal cruelty offences after electronic devices used to shock horses into running faster were discovered at his stables. Mr. Ware trained the Melbourne Cup winner of 2015. Conservationists are calling for more to be done to save emperor penguins in Antarctica. Scientists have estimated a significant fall in the numbers of the birds if the sea ice where they rear their young melts because of global warming. 9 previously unpublished novellas by the French author Marcel Proust go on sale for the first time today. The novellas explore what were considered risque themes for the era, such as physical love and homosexuality. BBC News.
Many thanks, Neil, for the latest. Hello, this is Carney and Lawrence with Newsday. Very warm welcome. We're going to go live to Zambia in a moment. Hear a very personal take on the fight against some of the world's most deadly diseases. Also, in the next half hour, we'll be going to Uganda, hearing allegations of minorities being hunted down, and the latest from Nigeria on the sex for grades scandal. Also, talking frankly in Kenya, plus Matthew Kenyon with the sport. That's Newsday.
Let's start in Zambia. Tuberculosis, or TB, is the major cause of HIV-related death. That's why the deadly combination of the two are often called the twin epidemics. Along with malaria, they are the major public health crisis currently ravaging the world. And the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB and malaria, they're holding a conference in Lyon, France, to try and raise more funds to help eradicate these infections. It's a 2-day meeting, and the fund is asking for $14 billion. In a report published to coincide with the conference, the medical charity MSF says a decline in international funding and the shifting of the financial burden to affected countries is in danger of reversing any gains. We can speak now to a Zambian HIV activist, Connie Wedenda. She joins us now from Lusaka. Welcome to the program, Connie.
Thank you so much.
We understand you lost 3 of your babies to HIV, but at that time you didn't even know that you had HIV, did you?
No, I didn't know that I had HIV, but later on in life, after I had tested for HIV, and I went back to the hospital, they told me that they had actually tested my children but did not tell me the results.
Wow, when you heard that, how did you feel?
It's one very bad experience, really. It's something that you wouldn't wish on another person. And you know, you get attached to these children even before they were born.
Absolutely.
And then losing them at different ages after you've had that connection with them, touching them, loving them, feeding them, and then suddenly you watch them wasting away slowly, and then as a mother you fail to do anything about it, and no one can do anything about it, because then there was no treatment in Zambia. It was really something that was heartbreaking, because I watched them go away slowly until the end.
And there must have been an immense amount of anger there, because as you said, the hospital knew about this, but they didn't bother telling
you. I wouldn't really blame the hospital so much, because there was a lot of misconceptions. There was a lot of stigma around, and then people didn't really fully understand what HIV or what AIDS was all about. So I think they were also taking some precautions for not telling me. Maybe they feared for my life. They didn't know how I was going to react. We had people that actually were committing suicide after they were told that they were HIV positive.
Wow. I want to dip into that stigma in a moment, but you have a healthy daughter now, Lubona,
Yes.
and this was after you started taking the antiretroviral.
Yes, that was almost like 16 years after I lost because in the year 1996, I lost 2 children in the same year, and I stayed for 16 years without having a child. But later on in life, I realized that I was on treatment for some time, and I was able to keep my HIV in check. It was actually undetectable, and I knew after working in the clinics, the HIV clinic, that I would not be able to pass on the HIV if my HIV was not detected.
Sure.
And and I decided to give it a try.
And Connie, when it comes to Zambia, is that when you talk about stigma there, what's it like now? Are people still reluctant to talk about it? And because you try and you're part of that. You're one of those campaigners that goes around telling people how important it is to take the antiretrovirals.
Yeah, well, with a lot of education, people really fully understand what it is now, and they can talk about it freely. But like you know, in every society, there are others that will always be resistant to some things. So we cannot fully say that we have eradicated stigma.
Sure.
There are some issues of stigma which are placed somewhere, but a lot of people now talk about it freely, and that has really helped when it comes to treatment and care.
And very briefly, when you look at the facts that international funding is on the decline, why is it so important that governments and donor organizations keep to this, increasing their funding for things like this? From a personal point of view, you would say that it is really crucial, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Personally, I'm dependent on the medication.
So
I am healthy right now because of the medication, and if that is taken away from me, I will not be able to live long and to see my baby grow.
And you wouldn't have been able to have a healthy baby girl, Lubona. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time, and
thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Connie Mudenda there, Zambian HIV activist, talking to us from Lusaka.
22 minutes to the hour, Newsday with Lawrence and Connie. Let's talk now about persecution of minorities in Uganda, particularly sexual minorities, members of the LGBTI community. Activists in Uganda say that such people are being hunted down. Pretty dramatic language. It comes after the killing of a gay activist over the weekend, and also in the background there are political moves to revive or retable the now much written about, rather notorious anti-homosexuality bill dating back to 2014. Joining us now is Paul Kanyamu, who is an activist, transgender activist, who fled to Kenya a few months ago, fearing for his safety. Paul, welcome to the programme. Could you just explain the circumstances which forced you to flee? Why people are talking of being hunted down?
Well, thank you. My name is Paul Kanyamu, a transgender. I'm currently here in Kenya at Kakuma refugee camp, and I'm a Ugandan by nationality. I was discovered by my parents how I am gay. I was beaten to pulp, thumped by my parents and a homophobic community. My parents disowned and chased me away from home. And all my relatives stood and said I must be killed just because I am gay. Simply because in our culture in Uganda, and basically in my own region where I come from, in my culture, being gay is seen as a curse and outcast. So that alone wasn't going to be tolerated, and my parents and relatives rose up and said I must be killed just because they found out how I am gay.
And Paul, you're now you've now crossed over into Kenya. Do you feel safer in Kenya?
I am not safer in Kenya. too, yeah. I am not safe in Kenya. Reason being, where I am right now, Kenya as a country of recent passed laws that criminalizes homosexuality. So, and where I am here, we are in Kakuma refugee camp and found in Turkana land. And as I speak now, the Turkana chief or the governor, Mr. James, has spoken and told the UNHCR of Kenya to vacate all LGBTI persons from Kakuma refugee camp and take them to another country or elsewhere because Kenya doesn't accept homosexuality.
Oh.
And another thing while at the camp, as a transgender, I'm always belittled. I'm mocked by my fellow refugees just because of the way I am, how I identify myself as a transgender.
Right. Hang on a minute, Paul. Listen, Paul. You just said something that really sort of got my attention. You're saying that the authorities in Kenya are specifically saying that no homosexuals should be allowed in refugee camps on their territory, and that therefore you should be moved. Am I right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you're very right.
And the basis for this is what? Is there a law that they have in Kenya that means that that is the case?
Yes, the laws of Kenya saying no homosexuality should be tolerated, and just because passed laws just like 2 months ago that criminalizes homosexuality.
Right. Now, hang on. You've had to leave your home and indeed your family because of your sexuality. You've now fled to what you hoped might be safety in Kenya. What happens now if the Kenyan government is saying that people like you should leave? Where will you go?
I'm totally worried. My life is in imminent danger as I can see right now. My life is in imminent danger. And as a transgender here, the refugees usually mock me. They beat me sometimes. They beat me when I'm in the line of food. And some people are threatening me with death threats. So I really don't know. My life is in danger. I can say all what I say.
It's a heartbreaking story that you tell. Can I ask? I mean, you're in a refugee camp, and most people who are fortunate not to be in that situation would imagine that the priorities are getting food, getting shelter. Why do people target you in the refugee camp? How do they know that you are transgender of a sexual minority?
Well, we are LGBTI here. We identify as LGBTI here, and just like you know how LGBT transgenders like put on the clothing, like they like putting on cars, they like putting on some clothes, they have rainbow colors. So these people are aware of the rainbow colors that they are for.
Right. Okay. So there's a signifier there that they understand. Do you have other people in your situation? Do you have a community that supports you, or are you on your own in the camp?
What? Come again?
Are you on your own in the camp as a transgender? Do you have others with you? Is there a community to support you?
Well, I'm with others in the camp, the fellow LGBTI, and we're under UNHCR. What's called UNHCR brought us to this camp. But they promised us protection as fellow LGBTI. But it is not the case. We are independent, and we are not safe at all. And we've tried to complain to UNHCR, but there is nothing that has been done, unfortunately.
Well, listen, you raise a very important issue, which I think we should maybe look into. Paul, thank you. Best wishes as well. You don't know where you're going to go next. Obviously, you don't want to be where you are, but you don't know where you could go for safety.
For sure, I don't know.
Well, Paul, thank you.
I don't know where I'm coming from.
Paul, thank you very much. Terrible story told to us by Paul.